Yeah, g'day everyone, and welcome to the TryPod Live with Winnie and Clarkey for our round 23 NRL recap show. As we head down the home stretch, the recap show is going to become more important than ever with so many results to talk about that dictate the ladder. We are happy that you're here with us live and happy if you are here later as a podcast. But with all that in mind, the man that none of this happens without, let me welcome in Winnie. How are you going, mate?
I'm okay, thanks, mate. How are you? Sorry, I never asked you how you are live on the show. You got a newborn. Are you going well, mate, this weekend? I know your boys didn't get up, neither did mine.
Mate, I'm going well, and I tell you what, it's always that interesting thing when you start a show because it's always how are you going? You can never kind of just get straight into it, but I appreciate you checking in, mate. I'm going really well. Let's kick over to our best bets though. Let's recap then our results. How do we go this round?
Yeah, really bad. I think into the round on a 5 best bet win streak, actually won the first. And I'll be honest, I think 5 best bets, I'm lucky not to reverse sweep. I can't really argue that I got any of them right. So I got what I deserved in a 1-4 record out of that, which does really hurt. And I said on Wednesday, it wasn't like me to like all those favorites. And those lines were from 8 to kind of 14.5. This is not common, but I don't think there's any issue with playing against teams that might have questionable motivation this time of year, playing double-digit favourites selectively. So I don't think that nothing was alarming to me. I really felt confident, just like I had the previous couple of weeks where we cleaned up. But in each and every game, the team that we went against, where I said there might have been reasons for those sides to give in, they didn't. We went every team we went up against for our 5 best bets, fought tooth and nail. So lost 4 of them, lost the mixed matchup and the same game as a result. It was a bugger of a weekend for my plays, but it did mean we got a lot more competitive footy action and a lot more interesting finals implications to discuss.
Yeah, no blowouts. You go to the 2020 season, maybe 2021, if I can remember correctly, and we got to this stage of the season, and really, unless the gun sides were resting players, you kind of had a play there. You were able to build some multis out with some try scorers. This year, great for entertainment. These games are back and forth. The one we just saw then, no one expected the Tigers to be in that close, having a chance after full time to score and win it against the Raiders. But great for entertainment, tough when you're trying to pick out some best bets. So let's jump into the round. Thursday night, which seems like so long ago now, it always feels that way. It was the Roosters v Sea Eagles, and the Roosters got up 26-16. In this one, I gave Billy Smith my MVP. Very talented centre that we've seen have a lot of downs in his career just due to injuries. And the way he's always fought back has really impressed me. And I thought that was his best game yet. So I was really, really proud of him. In the preview pod, I did favour the Roosters here with the -4.5. And that's because I have been ready to put a line through Manly. I want to say back to like our round 12 recap podcast. I swear I've said I'm ready to put a line through them. Then they go and win, and I've got to reassess. And it's almost deja vu me saying this right now. I feel like I said it recently, but now we are ready to finally put a line through them. But you have to remember all the way back to our preseason podcast. The reason why I wasn't so keen on Manly this year was their forward depth. I thought they were missing a little bit of depth there, particularly around the middle. They come into this one without Paseka and Josh Aloiai, and then Matt Lodge goes down early, who was shaping to be a key signing for them. So the Roosters improved there with an completion rate of 75%. The Seagulls had a key injury and were already missing some players. But again, you'd say a less than impressive performance by the Roosters. Biggest thing in this contest we've got to speak about, Winnie, was the 31 combined 6 again in penalties. I thought this game was just awful viewing. Slow, stop-start, lackluster. Dare I say the worst game of the round? Have I gone too far there?
I think you're a bit harsh. Like, there wasn't a great spectacle, but a bit harsh on the Roosters to say less than impressive, I suppose, when they get the win here against a team that was in finals contention. You mentioned Manly with those middles out, and maybe that's why you're not so impressed by the win. But, man, did you hear the news this week? I had written off Tom Trbojevic for the season, and then the news was trickling out that if they make the finals, he'll be available. And I thought to myself, man, I should have been on Manly. Like, that means their season's alive. They're a 20% chance to make the finals. Yes, they were underdogs on Thursday night, but it was clearly a winnable game, kind of anybody's game. And they're thinking to themselves, we get ourselves into a finals matchup and Turbo comes back, can beat anybody. We've seen it before. So I thought that might energize Manly. In fact, it was the Roosters who built a big lead. And look, refereeing was a contentious point, but we have to mention the first send-off of the season, was it? Or maybe
I think we've had one other.
We might have had one like round 2 or 3. I can't recall. Someone can correct me live, but Nathan Brown gets sent. And there were quite a few there was a send-off the very next day concerning your team, but there were sin bins as well. And generally, I would say, I think these are harsh. I don't know. I felt like Brown flew out of the line, but I don't know if he kind of went shoulder first. I just wonder if the contact is shoulder to head first point, then the player is going to get some seriously harsh ramifications. But sometimes a ball carrier can lower their head into a shoulder, like when a big prop is going in to make front up and make a tackle. They haven't done a lot wrong. I don't want to get too in the weeds of tackle technique. I just thought it was pretty harsh, and it opened the door for Manly. You actually thought Manly, on the back of that, could make some inroads and made the Roosters hang on to it. How did you see that call?
The sin bin send-off in particular?
Send-off of Brown, yeah.
Yeah, see, I wasn't so sure on this one. I thought it was probably the wrong call, but I absolutely knew once we got to the next game that Moeki Fotuaika, I had a bad feeling this is going to be a send-off as well. I do have the stats up. In round 2, we had a send-off. It was Jacob Saifidi against the West Tigers.
Right,
Peter Goff said goodbye to him, and we had 2 this round, and Nathan Brown and Fotuaika. I guess the way we need to look at this, Winnie, is tinfoil hat on for 1 second with me, please, brother. Wally Lewis, one of the greatest NRL players that is recognizable across the entire country, maybe even in multiple different countries, recognizable beyond rugby league, right? Comes out this week and says, I've got brain trauma, I'm suffering CTE. Has the NRL had some response due to that and thought maybe there'll be more eyes on the product this week to see how we're handling head injuries? I don't know if that played into it. Tinfoil hat off, it could. I'm not sure. Probably unlucky for Nathan Brown, though, to answer your question. Should we move on to Titans v Warriors?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you might not really want to talk about this one. Could be a bit painful, but it was another interesting one. It was the one and only winning best bet. I did have New Zealand -8 in this game and got kind of lucky. You probably don't win it without the send-off in this one that you can lead us off with.
Yeah, so the Warriors do pick up a win against my Titans at home, 28-18. Anyone that watches the show by this stage knows I'm a staunch Titans fan, and I should be more disappointed. You guys can probably see there's a smile on my face. I'm actually not too bothered with this loss, and I'll get into that in a second. I went with Sean Johnson for my MVP. 2 tries this, Winnie. I think he'll collect the 6 Dally M points, both voters giving him 3. Very, very exciting. He looms as the second New Zealand Warrior to ever win the Dally M behind Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. I got my pick wrong here. I put my hand up. I said in our preview pod, Titans +9.5. We're going to show up. I think everyone's putting a line through us a bit too early. We're going to have some effort here. And I was wrong in the pick. We did miss out by half a point there. But you guys would have to admit, I was right about the effort here for the Titans. We really, really tried. I thought the sin bin for Fotuaika was unfair. But given the precedent set the night before with Nathan Brown, I had a feeling it was coming. Was it a sin bin? Absolutely. There was clear contact to the head there. That's been a sin bin all season. But as Winnie and I just shown everyone, there's only been one other send-off. And that was a pretty bad high tackle by Jacob Saifidi. Much worse than these 2. You'd have to say that was a huge swinging arm. And he got 5 matches for that. Fotuaika looms with a 1-game suspension with an early guilty plea. So a 5 times worse penalty there, as does Nathan Brown, just to sort of put that in context. But the Titans' desire in this contest, the fact we gave it a real shake and didn't give up with 12 men for over 60 minutes, over an hour in the NRL with 12, really, really proud of that. For the Warriors, I suppose if I am being critical, and I don't want this to sound like I'm being biased against them because they fully deserve their win, probably a little bit underwhelming for a top 4 side. I just feel if you give the Panthers or the Broncos or the Storm the Titans, with respect to my side, 12 men for over an hour, they're probably going to win by a bit more than 10. But at the end of the day, Warriors get a win. I think maybe they overlooked us a little bit. They know they got bigger fish to fry. A win's a win at the end of the day. And as a Titans fan, I'm still happy. So, we didn't get the win, but I'm still proud of my side regardless in this one. Winnie, how'd you see it?
Yeah, you got a performance to be proud of. I actually think in a funny way that the send-off inspired the team. They kind of knew they had no hope, but they all dug in, and the crowd could sense it too. Although I say the crowd, they weren't all behind the Titans. It was nearly a home game for the Warriors, and we got the tip. A few of our followers commenting that the Gold Coast, especially when the Wars are going well, is like a second home. So it was a very packed house, great atmosphere. And as I said, I was on New Zealand for the best bet. And when you mentioned Wally Lewis, right? I honestly do believe that there are chain reactions and one thing leads to another. So you have that in the news, so you emphasis on safety. You get a send-off on the Thursday night, because it always happens. Like, there'll be an 8-point try awarded, and then like you haven't seen one for months, and then there'll be another one that round or the next week. It's like on their mind. I absolutely think the send-off was on the mind from the Thursday night. There was also an incident like 2 minutes earlier where Randall hit Wateni Zalesniak high and knocked him a bit dazed. And I believe that should have been a sin bin, but they were just said sufficient was a penalty. So I honestly think the bunker had in their mind, we've kind of didn't go harsh enough the last one. So I think the combination, when Fotuaika puts his hit on, they didn't penalise the previous one sufficiently, should have already been 10 to Randall. There's a send-off the previous night. So they've knee-jerked, and then they've gone, well, let's just send off Fotuaika. Well, the funny thing is, you typically ruin a game. And I can see people saying, do you get rid of the send-off? Do you replace it to 20 minutes? I think I discussed this last year or the year before. I do think 20 minutes is a bit more reasonable. Some people told me that might be what they do in rugby union, because I hate ruining a contest. It's entertainment, right? We pay money to watch it on TV or to go and watch it. You can still penalise somebody, you can fine, you can suspend, you can still put you can say that player can't come back on, but they can be replaced after 20, right? You can do all these things. So I think you need to take out deliberate foul play. Like, you don't want someone coming out saying, let's send our enforcer off the bench to take Nathan Cleary's head off first 5 minutes or something like that. Like, you've got to send that person off, because otherwise 10 in the bin is worth it to take out, the opponent's best player. So I think you've got to have that ability. But these are kind of, I don't know, some of them could just be sloppy or mistimed. It really doesn't look that bad to me. I appreciate the sentiment for safety. So anyway, the decision is made, and now I'm like, well, the best bet just won, and New Zealand's going to win by 40. Like, they're too good for the Titans as it is, and now the Titans have got to play with 12. And New Zealand did score 1 or 2 tries after getting the man advantage, but then Niukore gets 10 in the bin, and again, don't tell me he would have got 10 if the Titans didn't already have a man disadvantage. Gives a little slap. Yeah, but they want to even it up. So then Niukore gets 10 in the bin. The Titans score when it's 12 on 12. Well, they had to make hay when the sun shone there. Can't remember now. The Titans, I think, might have trailed by 4 at the deficit, hanging in there. Yeah. Second half, New Zealand couldn't pull away. So you criticise New Zealand so they didn't have that killer instinct. It's hard sometimes playing against the extra man because you don't want to force it. Remember that game last year when New Zealand, or was it 2 years ago, New Zealand couldn't beat Cronulla, who had Kennedy sent off and then had a sin bin later, so it was 13-11. So you want to stay patient. Ultimately, the reason New Zealand didn't kick away was sloppiness. The Titans completed at a really high rate. The Warriors completed pretty sloppy and spilled a lot of ball that were opportunities where they probably could have put on points. You also probably got to mention that the Warriors looked like they were going to score and be up 10 or 12, and Jaden Campbell takes an amazing 90-metre return intercept try that suddenly knocks the scores at 18 all. And while Campbell is a superstar and Brimson was ruled out in the warm-up, which is actually a positive, well, not a positive, but there was a massive silver lining there of just allowing Campbell to play fullback. Because had they said Campbell was going to play in the centres, well, either way, one was going to play centres. Brimo was going to play centre, but either way, Campbell shines, right? Probably worth mentioning, there's a clear knock-on in the ball contest on that play by the Titans, and it's missed by the bunker. It doesn't go on to affect the result, but pretty shocking call. Titans get to 18 all, and ultimately New Zealand do pull away in the final 10, as you'd expect. That advantage had to rear its head eventually. But as I said at the beginning, talking about this match, and there was a lot to unpack, the Titans just fought the whole game, and you have to give them massive props for that. I really feel that a lot of the Titans fans who paid their money to go see that game would have actually seen one of the better performances of the year.
And I got to agree with what you said about the near Corey sin bin, even as a Titans fan. Fafita pushed him in the face first. Like, a shove in the face is actually worse than a slap. So very, very unlucky there for the Warriors. So at the end of the day, they get the win. And as a Titans fan, I'm not too upset. I think that's the best way to recap that one. Proud of my side, and Warriors fans should be even prouder. We finished Friday night with the Panthers v Storm. We probably expected this one to be a lot tighter than it was and a bit more of a blockbuster. Didn't quite have that feel, but the Panthers walk away with a 26-6 point win. I went with Nathan Cleary for my MVP here with 2 try assists. I liked the Panthers here. I liked them at the line in our preview pod, but my bold call was I think that they'll hold the Storm to less than 3 tries. Storm were, of course, coming off a 46-point game with the Eels. Now, I'd love to sit here and say, I claimed that they only scored 1. Panthers defense is so good. But with Jerome Hughes ruled out subsequently after I'd made that call, it's probably not fair that I do that. But I will say, if anyone took the under try market on trust with me there, then you would have been stoked. Not that you're ever happy when a player is injured, but it certainly helped the play there. My only reasonable assessment here is that the Panthers are miles ahead of the competition right now. You look at the other top 4 sides this round, being the Warriors and Broncos. They didn't play top 4 competition. The only other top 4 team is the Storm. And look at how the Panthers just handled them, disposed of them like they were nothing. And that's not to say that the Warriors and Broncos were poor. They both had double-digit wins, but the Panthers just a different class, a different level. And they just made it look easy. They're just simply brilliant. They have to be everyone's premiership favourite at this stage. And I suspect that you'd absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, and Peachy wasn't available, and everyone saw Tungo in the reserves and assumed, oh, you won't really start Hosking in centre. You know, Tungo will come back, but they didn't rush him back. They don't feel the need to, play anybody before they're absolutely ready. So they played Hosking in the centres. I think I said before the game, Lenu was, he's still out as well, so they can get even stronger, which is scary. But it wasn't really a fair fight, as you said, Hughes, and it was Coates as well, wasn't it? Who were ruled out, before the game. And you want to beat the Panthers, so you need, all the bullets available in your gun there. So I think I said that as well on Wednesday. Like, it loomed as an awesome blockbuster. We know the rivalry, we know the positions on the ladder, but it's not really a blockbuster when Penrith are just firing on all cylinders because just about nobody can get near them. So that was the case here again, just a procession. And the Storm still had a great weekend. I'll talk top 4 on Saturday. I'll talk top 4 when we talk about a side that let their chance slip. But if there is a positive for the Storm, maybe someone like Hughes, although we don't know the extent of his injury and whether he's definitely back next week, but you rested him in a game you probably would have lost anyway, and you had some opponents slip on a banana peel. And so I can say for Melbourne, they've got the absolute inside track for top 4, regardless of this loss.
Yeah, and that's the thing for the Storm. It's just, that they have hiccups like this. Their key players get injured throughout the year. They're without their star fullback for a lot of the year, and they're still in the top 4 somehow. They really are an impressive football side that you just got to take.
And that is the other point I wanted to make as well. Awesome news that Pappenhausen made his return to the footy field, played up here on the sunny coast. I think from reports, there's a little highlight clip going around. That's all I saw. But he played 40, had a try assist, a few runs, few supports, kind of looked himself. So we don't know if Melbourne would slot him straight back in. My guess would be give him one more week up here. I don't know if Bellamy has showed his hand or is just being coy about it.
I'll make the call now. We won't see him back in the NRL for at least another week or two because he did get taken off at halftime. 384 days out. Not the sort of injury that Bellamy would rush back, I don't believe. Let's kick it over to Super Saturday. It was the Cowboys v Broncos, and the Broncos got up 30-14. Really tough to pick an MVP in this one, but I couldn't go past Payne Haas, who had 41 tackles, 0 missed, and 200-plus meters. Just an absolute weapon in the middle of the field there. I was very keen on the Broncos here, and I thought they might cover that line in the preview pod, and I did tip as much in the preview pod also. But I do have to admit, once I saw Reynolds got ruled out, my live thinking actually did change, and I did start to think, what sort of plays could we make on the Cowboys here instead? But alas, the Broncos go to Townsville and they snap the Cowboys' home winning record. I believe they had 6 in a row there. For the Broncos, they conceded 7 penalties and they only completed at 67%, which is far from their best that we know this year. But they still walk away 16-point victors, which is very, very impressive. The Cowboys did trouble them at times, But the Cowboys are a side this year that take out that impressive 6-game winning streak and that run they went on. They have been a little bit ordinary at times this year, and the Broncos have always been classy. So I think even though you look at that poor completion rate, you put those two together, we saw a little bit of both factors there. And ultimately, the Broncos go on to win 13 plus in impressive fashion. We didn't have a play on this game, did we?
No, and yeah, I liked Brisbane on Wednesday, but I did also change my opinion. When I heard Reynolds was out on Friday, I thought, man, that brings it right back to even. And I've got the Cowboys at home more desperate. I probably would have to pick them. That wouldn't have been a best bet, but just, the game was basically pick them. I actually thought Cowboys. So sorry, because everyone asked me, everyone messaged. If there's any news, then people, want to know, which is fine. And I'm always available to try and chat with people in the threads. People message, DM me and everything. Unfortunately, everyone who did contact me heard me say I would tip the Cowboys, but they weren't good enough in this one. They got opened up on multiple occasions. It could have been an even uglier score when you consider how many tries Brisbane bombed in the first half, where Brisbane made clean line breaks and then just couldn't finish off the tries. But I thought there was a telling moment really early. I think it was for an opportunity for the opening try of the game where the Cowboys just stripped Brisbane for numbers and put Felt's made his return back to first grade because Taulagi slotted into the centres, put Felt away for a regulation winger try. But the desperation by Katoni Staggs, and again, Brisbane didn't have to have this game, but he made a very athletic play to actually get across and push Felt and save the try. And that just showed the desperation Brisbane was willing to play with here. And they were the more desperate, more hungry side all day. I felt like the Cowboys were looking for somebody to make something happen, and you look to Drinky, but Brisbane were just shutting him down. They weren't going to let Drinkwater beat them. And I was so impressed. I really thought if you can go and do this, to a rival, to a strong side, can't forget what the Cowboys had done from rounds 14 to 21, to go in and kind of shut this side down without your key orchestrator, without the benefit of Reynolds' kicking game, which allows the Broncos to dominate so many clashes, was definitely, showed that their premiership credentials. And I think it was on the back of that forward pack, Paddy Carrigan. How many career games did he wait for a try? 60 or 70 something? Yep. And scores in back-to-back weeks as well. And Brisbane remains in the minor premiership hunt, whereas the Cowboys are still well and truly in the top 8 hunt. No chance really of making the 4, but they've got time to recover from this game. And it's hard to make a good judgment on North Queensland when you do play such a strong opponent. Sometimes they're not going to let you look good. But I was most disappointed in the Cowboys' defense in this one, when saying again, it is against a rival and you are at home, and Brisbane wasn't full strength.
Yeah, they weren't full strength, but they do have an away record this year of 10-1. They're 6-4 at home, so they're actually much better on the road this year. The Broncos, Panthers above them are 7-3 away, so they do have the best away record in the league, and that win keeps them, as you said, on 36 competition points, equal with Panthers, who are ahead with 4 and against. But don't forget the Broncos still do have a bye to come, which is very, very important in terms of minor premiership implications. Our next game, we headed west over to Optus Stadium in Perth. It was the Dolphins v Knights, and the Knights got up 30-28. I went with Kalen Ponga for my MVP here, who had 2 try assists and a try. Where this is really, really interesting, I've covered the sport since 2013. I've never given someone MVP or man of the match, whatever you want to call it, player of the game, 5 weeks in a row. Kalen Ponga becomes the first person I've ever done that for. Drinkwater had 4. He came very close in the Cowboys run there, but Ponga is officially the most quote-unquote informed player I've ever seen on the page. I did hint on the preview pod that the Dolphins plus did have some merit here, but I'm not going to claim it because I did sit on the fence a little bit too much there. I thought the Knights were, in a way, lucky to get away with this one, but not from a team perspective. I didn't look at the Knights as an overall unit of 17 and say they were poor. I just thought it was a few individuals that let them down with some decision-making, some poor choices, some poor defensive decisions, some decisions to not compete for balls in the in-goal, to let Asako score a first-half hat-trick. Some weird stuff went on. And so I'm not concerned with the Knights' ability to, I guess, bounce back from this one. Not that they need to because it was a win, but certainly they're better than what they've shown us is what I'm trying to say. And for the Dolphins, it was another classic 2023 Dolphins performance where their effort alone isn't quite enough to get them home. But if you put in that amount of effort for 80 minutes week in, week out, and you start to build a bit more class around your roster, which we know they are with Flegler, Herbie Farnworth, etc., then they are a great side for the future. And I continue to sing the praises of the Dolphins this year. And I do think they can factor into finals contention in 2024 once they start to build that class in key positions. Tough one for you. You go for the Dolphins, and we miss out on a best bet. So it's a double loss, unfortunately. But how did you see this one?
You're right. Once I felt like the Knights couldn't cover, although I played -8. So they did lead by 8 late in the game. And then when they're up 2, you never know, you could get a runaway try. And that would have been the beauty in buying that half point down had the Knights won by 8. But I don't think they deserve to. I agree with you. They were lucky to win. So I also wouldn't have minded if I'm going to lose if the Finns could have got the win here. Now, I agree with the pattern for the Dolphins. Very similar game to a week ago in Rocky against the Dogs. We back and forth and not a lot of defense and a chance to win. And unfortunately for the Dolphins, goal kicking is kind of the difference. Izako is a better goal kicker than Kalyn Ponga, but he looked, I don't know, I mean, he scores his tries out on the right wing. You can't fault the man too much as scores a first half hat-trick. Although a couple of players this weekend scored first half hat-tricks and their teams lost, funnily enough. But obviously, converting his own tries, invariably they're out a bit wider, but he missed both his first 2 conversions in the same way that he missed the game winner opportunity last week, whereas Ponga did miss a conversion and slotted one from the sideline and the non-preferred sideline for a lefty for the Knights' final try, which Ponga set up. And I agree, he is the form player in the competition. I've heard people say, if the Kangaroos were picking a team, who should it be, Teddy or Walsh? I'd pick Kalyn Ponga. I understand that Origin sets a massive precedent, but I feel like there's an explanation for why Ponga didn't play Origin. And I think he's the best fullback in the competition right now. And they don't win it without him because he could just make things happen. Gets the Knights what you think's the decisive try, but the Dolphins get back with an opportunity, earning a penalty off the short restart and score. And then the Dolphins get up the Knights' end again and could have a chance for a famous victory. And they're giving the crowd their money's worth in the opener of the doubleheader. And the Finns get done for a penalty for holding in the scrum, which you very rarely see. And when I saw the ref blow penalty, I thought it was going to be opportunity for the Finns to even it up and send us to golden point, but it was against the team in possession. Brutal first tackle in a game like that. After the Knights had got a lead, but then we mentioned there was a sin bin. It's not coming to mind, player that was sin binned. But
it was Lockie Fitzgibbon in minute 22.
Hip drop, that's right. And the Dolphins actually scored 3 tries, all to Izako. So an Izako hat-trick during the 10 minutes that Fitzgibbon was off the field, which then allowed the Finns to build a lead. Finns scored the first try second half too, so 10-point second half lead. Real opportunity to win that game. But the Knights, to their credit, they didn't flinch and made it. That'd be 5 on the trot for the Knights, right? So they are still a side that's not mathematically out of the 4 either, if you can believe, and well entrenched in the 8 too. So, look, just one other point about getting this game wrong. I felt pretty happy about that bet. The line ended up being 10.5 by kickoff. I felt pretty confident about it. Beautiful conditions. Knights probably scored enough points to cover. And again, it goes back to me saying I wanted to take the team with no questionable motivation, the team I knew would put up a good performance when so much travel was involved. But maybe what I missed, because I went against the 2 underdogs in Perth, was the fact that the game was in Perth. That occasion supplied additional motivation because there were 40,000 fans, people that may very rarely get to see live rugby league. And I've got to hand it to the Finns and the next side that we'll talk about. They really turned up for the occasion. I don't think it's a wrong strategy to bet against sides that just aren't going to be consistent every week late in the year when their season's kind of slipped away. You often get your big blowout wins, but it wasn't the case. Maybe that's something to keep in mind. I know you cautioned that Bennett could get his team up for this because they could see it as sort of a landmark occasion. And yeah, deserved to cover, very easily could have won.
And what I'll offer is if right now someone says we're going to replay this game, it's kicking off right now, You can have another best bet on the Knights minus 9.5 again. I'm taking it. Really, I question that Lachlan Fitzgibbon sin bin. Very, very minor hip drop. I think on report could have been sufficient with a fine, and that allowed the Dolphins to score 3 tries. You take out that 10-minute period there, and the Knights don't really give the Dolphins a sniff in this one. I think they cover that line quite easily. So, don't want to blame officials, but maybe we were a bit unlucky on that one. Let's jump into the second game of that doubleheader. We weren't unlucky on this one. It was just a bad pick. It was Rabbitohs v Sharkies. Sharkies win 26-16. Went with Nico Hines for my MVP with a try assist and 7 tackle breaks, but his halves partner Trindle was great as well. Now, I will put my hand up here and say I got this completely wrong, and I've had the wrong read on the Rabbitohs for the past fortnight now, where they've been taking little jabs, and I've been waiting for that knockout blow. I could sense it, and it just hasn't come. They are such an interesting football side, and what I want to say, Winnie, is it appears as an attitude issue. I'm looking from the outside. I'm not going to be one of those journalists that pretends, I've got the inside read. I don't know, but from the outside looking in, it looks like an attitude issue where they come into these games and they're expected to win. They don't really give a crap. They just want to play footy, and they think that just by playing footy, it's going to be enough to overcome these sides and win. When it's against the elite sides, it's more focused. Now, let me read this out to you, Winnie. They've held the Panthers this year to 16-18. They've held the Storm to 18-12. They've held the Broncos and Warriors both to 6. They are our top 4 sides. When against top 4 opposition, they concede an average of 12.7 points against them. Then we go against the Sharks on a 3-game losing skid that are conceding 30-plus points in those games, and somehow the Bunnies concede more than double what they concede against top 4 competition. Now, when I look at plays and tipping, I'm a numbers man, data, historical, sometimes Omen. The Rabbitohs ticked all of those boxes. So whilst I put my hand up and say I got this one completely wrong, I don't know what more we could have done with the best bet here. The Rabbitohs just let us down, and I'm left with a lot of questions as to what happened here. I thought they should have won comfortably, particularly when you look at that interesting stat I put forward there. But really keen to hear your assessment of this one also.
Let me start with a question, though. Those stats, you're right. And I know South Sydney did hold Brisbane to 6 at Suncorp. But Brisbane did score 30-something against them at the Sunny Coast. So when you said they're holding top 4 sides to 12 on average, did you maybe miss that game out? Because I feel like that would have bumped the average up a little bit. Yeah, so just to tidy that part up. But your point's still taken that when they've been switched on, they can defend. They made the grand final 2 years ago. Wasn't all razzle-dazzle and attack. This side could defend with the best of them. And if they're dead serious about making a charge up the ladder and the top 4 was there for the taking, especially after the Storm had lost the previous night, it's got to start with defense. And I totally echo your point about attitude. They look like too overconfident, like they think they can just switch it on whenever, and they think they can chase down any score. And the crazy thing is that, look, the best bet was minus 11.5. Now, they were down 26-0 at one stage. So you never felt you could win the best bet, even though, once again, we got closing line value because it did close 13.5, but it counts for nothing at the end of the day. But if you just were like following live scores or whatever, Sharks try, whatever, 26-0, 26-6, like you might think the Rabbitohs were never in it. But the funny thing is that if you watch the end of the game, you definitely thought the Rabbitohs could win. The amount of chances the Rabbitohs blew at the end, and when the Rabbitohs did cut it to 26-6, but then they scored again, and then again the next set, and there was still like 10 to go, 15 to go. And the Rabbitohs were on the attack again, and I felt like the Sharks were seriously nervous. I also recall a moment at 20-0 to the Sharks where Tyrone Munro? Yeah. He just spills an intercept. Like, he's gone. He's off to the races if he takes that, and he probably should have got 2 hands to it. And that was a 12-point swing because the Sharks scored that set instead. So it could have been 20-6 instead of 26-0. Unfortunately for the young man Munro, he had a pretty mixed evening. I think he dropped multiple balls. There was a kick in behind where there was a big opportunity. There was one where he was streaking down the sideline and he'd beaten his man, and I think he was just shifting his grip on the ball and just dropped it cold in open space. And he's an exciting player in open space. You love to see the Rabbitohs unearth him and have him on the back of what is such a deadly backline. But I guess if you leave yourself that much work to do, then a mistake or two is going to cost you dearly. So while I thought, oh, geez, the killer blow here could be that you've been waiting for the Rabbitohs to land, could be happening in this final 20 minutes. We could be on for an epic comeback, but they fell short because they fell too far behind. You give credit to Cronulla because they came in, they applied themselves. We mentioned they were missing key players and that they can never beat anybody who's top 8. And, of course, they saved, one of their gutsiest performances of the season to prove the doubters wrong in this one. And Nico stepped up again. And I definitely do think they'd be nervous, but ultimately they capitalised on slow starting South Sydney. Cronulla gets the win. Cronulla still has an opportunity to finish top 4. And, a game like this might save their spot in the finals where a lot of us had written them off. I'll talk top 4 right now. So Penrith's obviously box seat. They're going to be short favourites every week, and they've got such a superior points differential. They're highly likely they're going to win the minor prem unless they drop a game. And I don't see who's going to beat Penrith unless like the Cowboys had to win on round 27 and Penrith rested some players potentially, right? Brisbane is behind Penrith on points differential. Now, you said they're going to get a bye, but a bye doesn't really help you catch Penrith because Penrith will just win the week that Brisbane's on the bye.
Yeah.
They've got they've got the same number of losses. That's the important thing. But importantly for Brisbane, winning on Saturday afternoon keeps them 4 points ahead of the Warriors, which means that they don't have to look over their shoulder. And coming second ahead of third is even more important than coming first ahead of second because there's a difference of whether or not you play at home in the first week of the finals. So had Brisbane lost yesterday, they could be caught by the Warriors. And the Warriors have got all very winnable games, and the Warriors will be favourites every remaining game this year as well. And that could actually mean that for the amazing season Brisbane's had, they would have to go to Auckland in the first week of the final. So they don't want to do that. So they're holding on to second. So the Warriors are going to get third. And fourth place now is going to be the Storm, unless the Storm drops 2 games. So they do play the Raiders next week, and Hughes is questionable, and Canberra were very ordinary today, but we've seen them get upsets in Melbourne. And then Melbourne plays Brisbane in Brisbane, so it's losable. So for those who are riding Rabbitohs top 4 with me, it's a long shot now because it needs like a 6-leg multi to win. It needs the Rabbitohs to win their remaining 3, which I think they will, but it needs the Storm to drop 2 games. And I'm going to assume the Storm will beat Dragons and Titans. Upsets happen. We've seen it evidently in this game. But it would have to be basically Canberra upsets Melbourne in Melbourne and then Brisbane beats Melbourne. And I think that then Canberra would have a chance to actually sneak into the 4 if they did beat Melbourne. So Souths might actually need Canberra to drop a game too. Canberra does also have Brisbane on the slate. So there's still a path for the Rabbitohs to finish top 4 with all that said and done. But when you need 6 different events to happen, it's like more like a 1 in 12, 1 in 15 chance now. I'm sorry to say the Bunnies have lost twice as favourites since I tipped that top 4 finish out. And, losing as a 13-point favourite yesterday, that's brutal for their hopes when they'd left themselves quite a lot of work to do this season. Then when your margin for error is slim, you can't make errors like the Rabbitohs did last night.
And to be fair, in my recap there, probably the only thing I didn't do was give credit to the Sharkies, which I absolutely should do. They deserve this win fully and remarkable. I re-punched the numbers while you were talking. They averaged 14 against top 4 sides, not 12.7. Run home for the Panthers is Sea Eagles, Titans, Eels, and Cowboys. All loomers, very winnable games. For the Eels, for the Broncos, it is the Eels, a bye, Raiders, and then Storm. So that you'd say that they come off the bye and then they verse 2 sides in or around the top 4 there. So a tougher run home for Brisbane, it must be said. We mentioned the Eels there. Let's talk about their game against the Dragons, where they won 26-20. For my MVP in this one, I went Bryce Cartwright. He had 2 tries and 9 tackle breaks. I liked the Eels in our preview pod. In fact, I was ultra confident. I couldn't see anything happening here but an Eels dominant win. I'm talking scorelines of 30-40. So I did get this one wrong as well. Their line of minus 15.
And the thumbnail I've just noticed, in case anyone's scratching their head, it flatters the Dragons a little bit too much.
I see. Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. So they do pick up the 6-point win there, but with their line of minus 15.5, I thought for sure that they would cover that. They had a really ordinary first half. And I guess here's the issue for the Eels, without meaning to take away from their win, because they were great in the second half. They have a tough run home, and they come up against some sides that simply aren't going to let them back into the contest in that second half. And so, whilst there is positives there for the Eels that they were able to come back and get this one done, at the end of the day, it probably is still season over. The sides that they come up against aren't going to give them enough to come back in the second half here. Now, for the Dragons, I had a closer look at their season. I've got 8 games this year that they lost by 8 or less, and 6 of those games were 6 points or less, so 1 converted try. If we say that they win half of those close losses, that puts them 1 win outside of the top 8. They'd be on 24 competition points. Top 8 is currently on 26. Now, obviously, their foreign games would be horrible. They wouldn't be playing finals. But maybe Shane Flanagan does have something to play here with his side in 2024, Winnie. What do you make of the Dragons in this one, and maybe a look ahead to their future as well?
So my best bet, which I thought was pretty clever, was Eels to win both halves. We didn't even need them to necessarily cover the line, which was 15.5 on Wednesday, but closed 17.5. And again, I talk about closing line value just because it is something as a punter that you want to be getting. So you want to be making bets that, within a few days or by kickoff, those odds are lower, right? Or that line has shifted in your favor, because that shows that the market, the latest market is the most liquid and kind of has the most market intelligence built into it. So that's generally a pretty good indicator. And we got $1.81 win both halves. I saw that crunched into like $1.40, which is actually a massive overreaction. But $1.50, $1.60, that was. Again, it doesn't count for much. You said the Eels had a bad first half. They were actually on fire like the first 15, 20 minutes. Scored a couple of tries, got a penalty. Now, look, your man, I give you credit. You said Cartwright was smoky for a try. Well, he has a double. He has the second try, and he actually has the try that the Eels needed to seal it. As I said before, the graphic is incorrect. Of course, it was Parramatta winning by 6 points. But Cardi, can he just play a game where he just doesn't have to make or break plays? Because he comes up with a horrendous offload. You cannot tell me, nobody will ever convince me that the horrendous offload by Cartwright when it was 10-0 to the Eels and the Dragons were just about on the rack and it was first tackle 20 metres out, that wasn't like a 30-point swing. In my mind, I felt like Para was going to have a field day and run up a score. Cardi comes up with a horrendous first tackle error. The Dragons score on the back of it, and momentum swung. And I'm really not making an excuse for Para or for my bet. It's just the feeling I had. I felt like the Eels were switched on and not only saw it as a game where the 2 points was there to be taken, but they could really enhance their points differential. And then it just swung. And we mentioned before, Izako first half hat trick. Ravalawa scores the next 4 straight tries, but 3 of them in the first half. So that took away the chance for my best bet to win. Parramatta did not even win in the first half. In fact, trailed by 4 points. And, of course, the game was still there to be won second half, and Para did score the final 3 tries of the game to come back from a 10-point deficit and keep their season alive. But you're not too impressed. St. Georgia, they're a funny side. Like, you could have easily seen them wilt and fold, especially when they blinked and they were suddenly down a couple of tries early in this one against a switched-on Para with Dylan Brown back. But to St. George's credit, they dug in, they fought hard, and made a game of this and had opportunities to send this to extra time late in the piece. So it's a funny one with these sides like St. George, who if they'd won a few close games earlier in the year, they'd be in the mix, but they're not. So you don't know what they're going to dish up week to week. But I just would have thought Parramatta would have too much class today, so I was definitely underwhelmed. And again, that cost the 4th of the 5 best bets.
Yeah, I was very underwhelmed with the Eels, it must be said. Win's a win, absolutely, when you got to win at this stage of the season, but must be said, underwhelming against the side they really should have put to the sword and got that for and against up and about. Let's jump into our last game of the round. It was Raiders v Tigers here in Canberra. I always say here in Canberra as if you guys are here with me, forgetting everyone's everywhere, but Raiders do win 22-18. final game of the round, so I never have notes for this one because we're always in a bit of a hurry to get on here live for you guys. But I just thought that in this game, the Raiders were good, but also horrible at the same time. I've got now their completion rate was 65%. They only completed 26 out of 40. And there was a few referee decisions that went in their favor, such as what I thought to be a pretty obvious forward pass from Jack Whiten, but they actually go on to score off that. And so if you're a Tigers fan, you're probably thinking we're a little bit unlucky in this one. It's another tight loss for a Tigers side that, in my opinion, has shown enough effort to not deserve another wooden spoon, but it does look like that's the way it's going to finish for them. For the Raiders, they were definitely off today. They were nowhere near the best, but there's just something about how they play in Melbourne. I'm not ready to put a line through them next week under any circumstances. I almost feel like the Raiders are the sort of side that they're going to play better and they're going to meet their competition is what I'm trying to say. And so I think they will rise to the Storm's level and we'll have a cracker game next round, whilst they were really underwhelming, it must be said, here against the Tigers. How did you see this one, though?
Yeah, saw it a bit disappointed because my best bet was Raiders minus 10.5. I thought they really were going to buck that trend that they can't blow anybody out. They were going to take care of business at home today. And it was the same old story. They could not put the Tigers away. Felt like the Raiders had the better of the game in the first half, but they threw an intercept, and it was a pretty spectacular try. An intercept to Nofaluma, and he goes like 60, 70 meters, and he realizes he's being caught, jags in field, throws a quadruple cutout, they end up scoring with Charlie Staines in the other corner, and Api Coruscant, not that much of a noted goal kicker, but he slots a sideline conversion, and suddenly Canberra's only up 4 at halftime. But you mentioned that key moment. I thought it was a forward pass as well, but Raiders get away with it, and it's basically a 70-meter try by Seb Chris that brings the lead back out to 10. And at that point, I'm expecting Canberra just kicks on, and Canberra's just going to be too strong and not going to switch off, knowing that they've just not put anybody away this year, and that Ricky's losing, more hairs than me on the sideline and aging probably at a similar rate because his team never just gives him a comfortable win to enjoy. So I really felt like Canberra, in front of their home crowd, would take care of business, but no. And it's always a matter of, well, what's the cause there? Is it all one team, or is it a combination of what the opponent does? And because West are that kind of side that, to their credit, fights back. Remember these sides met a couple of months ago. It was 18-0 Canberra. West suddenly out of nowhere pulled it to 18-all, although they ended up losing. No, West pulled 19-18 in front and then lost on that penalty. There's a similarities here because the Tigers were down 10 in the second half, but they score the final try, which was, again, Nofaluma, I think a second kick on a last play option. Oh, no, sorry, that was a try to pull them back within 8 or 10, because then it's Luke Brooks that scores scores the try that cuts it to 4. Contentious, maybe. I thought he could have been in front of the kick of Coruscant, but if it's line ball, you give it to him. And the Tigers could have won this game. Not only did they have a repeat set with a couple of minutes left that they then spilled the ball second tackle, but they got the ball off a one-on-one strip inside the final 30 seconds and had an opportunity where the ball went from right to left and then a kick into the corner for Nofaluma to score a try that would have leveled it with a kick to go in front. He just can't quite get to it on the full, and he can't quite get the bounce. And they did actually keep that ball alive and then receive a penalty. So we had to have an anticlimax and then replay the final play. And ultimately, the Raiders were able to smother and survive that final shot by the Tigers. But boy, it was close. And when you're the Raiders and you're double-digit favourites and you're at home and you think you're a legit top 8 side with an opportunity to still make the 4, you've got to be a lot better than that. So highly disappointing for my best bet. You give some credit to West, I suppose, for not knowing when they're beaten.
Not only that, to add to what you're saying in terms of underwhelming and I guess disappointment for the Raiders, 8 line breaks to 1. That one line break was, of course, the David Norfoluma intercept, which was Raiders inflicted. So the Tigers didn't break their line once defensively. They only broke 26.
Is that right? I feel like Dane Laurie definitely had a line break.
8-1.
That might have been missed in the. Or does the intercept not count as a line break? Because the Dane Laurie did slice them open on one occasion. But you're right. Like Canberra had the better of the game.
It could be kind of as a half break, which they've created a new stat for this year. They haven't fully clarified what constitutes a half break. But certainly when you're making 8 line breaks to 1, the score should not read 22-18. In fact, your opponent should only have 1 try max, really. So really, really
well, tries off kicks can happen. And they're always that little bit more fluky. So look, those stats you're reading out maybe makes the case for Canberra deserving the 2 points. And I know a lot of NRL fans and a lot of punters are going to do. They're going to write off the Raiders and they're going to say that was rubbish and they just can't beat anybody by a decent margin. And then maybe people like me and you are going to think, oh, look, they could have had more killer instinct, but they really did have the better of the game. Maybe the Raiders have still got a bit more about them. So I appreciate that those stats, they do show a different perspective on what happened. But just the eye test to me, Canberra needed to put the Tigers away. So, yeah, you might say a bit of bad luck here or there if you concede off a kick. But, again, the Tigers were in position to score on those, fifth tackle options because they got that field position and because the Raiders took the foot off the throat.
Forgive me here. I'm doing this while we're live, but I'm looking at last year. The Raiders beat the Storm in Melbourne twice. And I know they've got a good record there, man. They beat them twice again in 2020. So I think that's 4 in a row.
2019 was the year the Raiders made the grand final. They beat Melbourne in Melbourne in a finals game. They beat them in the regular season as well.
And they
definitely. Yep.
Well, Melbourne have opened as $1.30 favourite. Raiders are as high as $3.65. There could be some merit in early play there. Just if you're a stats better or a stats punter, that there is some seeming value there, given their recent record in Melbourne and the fact they need to bounce back from a poor performance.
I never would preempt what I'm going to say on Wednesday because I haven't done my full deep dive and, we don't know team lists. But I would say if you have any belief in Canberra, and I don't think there's many left, but if you are someone who has belief they could get a result, one benefit you may get out of taking Canberra early is that, Hughes has not been ruled out yet, where that could be coming. And I think something like that definitely levels the playing field. But understandably, Storm have still, despite the previous history, the Storm, off the top of my head, should be more than a converted try favourite at home. So I can understand those odds, but it's a tricky one when you don't know the status of a couple of key players yet.
Particularly Jerome Hughes, who Bellamy did say a couple of weeks, we don't know for certain. I know you'll never officially give out a tip before you've done your full deep dive, but if anyone wants to take me on trust, I'll say now, I am going to say the Raiders on our preview pod, and I think that if Hughes is ruled out, that line will only move in a worse direction for the Raiders there, so potentially some bit of early value there. But that is all we have time for in our round 23 NRL recap. We gave you a little taste of the round 24 preview show, which will be coming Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. We hope you can join us there also. So to our viewers, from myself, thank you very much for being with us. And over to you when you to sign off the show.
Yeah, the taste I've got is the taste of bitter defeats of several best bets in a row. So back to the lab for me. I'll try and turn it back around. Highs and lows all year. It's been, in fact, let's end it on this. I do blame you. Do not come up with a thumbnail that puts me in the spotlight and says, can he keep the win streak alive? Because you just put too much weight on my shoulders and we were just asking for trouble. And the punting gods, they don't see kindly to anybody thinking that this is easy or that it's that you're just going to expect to keep winning. And we're sure enough, there's two types of punters. There's the humble ones and those that are about to be. So we certainly got humbled again this weekend, despite the fact that I think every line or odds moved our way and that we felt great about it. It didn't work out. So I apologise for those who did follow along, and I'll do my best to come up with some better ones on Wednesday. But nevertheless, I hope you guys all have a good week, and I do appreciate everyone that has tuned in with us live or is giving this a watch or a listen a little bit later. So have a great week, guys. See you Wednesday.